She wasn't supposed to save him. She was just supposed to clean his house. But the night she fell asleep in his chair, still talking, mid-sentence, without permission or apology, something shifted inside a man who hadn't slept in 5 years, and nothing was ever the same again. Welcome back to Hidden Kindness Tales. The clock read 12:29. Anthony Olamide didn't need to look at it. His body already knew. He sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, hands loosely folded, staring at the marble floor the way a man stares at something when he isn't really seeing it. The bedroom around him was enormous and perfect, white and gold, soft amber light, furniture chosen by someone who understood beauty but had never once sat alone inside it at midnight. The clock changed. 12:30. His jaw tightened slightly, just slightly, the way it always did. 5 years. Every single night. Same time. Same slow tightening in the chest. Same silence pouring in from the corners of the room like something that had been waiting just outside the door. He had tried everything the world recommended, specialists, medication that made him feel like a stranger wearing his own face, a retreat center in the mountains where phones weren't allowed, and the air was clean and the nights were supposed to heal you, a therapist who charged more per hour than most families spent in a month, and who nodded with great patience and said things that were true, but didn't reach the place that was actually broken. Nothing worked. Because what was broken wasn't medical. Anthony was 41 years old. He controlled companies across 4 countries. He had rebuilt his father's empire from grief and rubble, fought off every relative who came smiling with lawyers, expanded everything his parents had built until it was beyond what they had ever imagined. He had won every battle placed in front of him. Every one except this. Every night at 12:30, alone in the dark, he was still just a son. A son who had let his mother's call go to voicemail on a rainy Tuesday afternoon because he was in a board meeting and thought there was time. There is always time, until there isn't. She had left the message, laughing, telling him his father was threatening to eat his dinner if he didn't come home soon. He had smiled at his phone and typed back, "Save me some, home by 9. The accident happened at 7:40. A wet road, a truck. 2 people who had loved each other and their son for 40 years, simply gone, and the world kept moving, indifferently, as if nothing of consequence had occurred. Anthony had stood in a hospital corridor that smelled of antiseptic and distant grief, and understood for the first time that the world owed him nothing, not explanation, not pause, not mercy. He learned to live without mercy. What he couldn't learn to live without was sleep. He walked to the window now and pressed his palm against the cold glass. The city glittered below him, alive and unbothered. Somewhere down there, ordinary people were sleeping, just sleeping, without earning it, without negotiating with their own minds, without lying in the dark, counting the distance between now and morning. If peace was for sale, he said quietly, to no one, I would own the factory. Mama Grace found him there most mornings. She had been with the family for 30 years, had rocked him as a baby, scolded him as a boy, wept quietly at his parents' funeral while he stood dry-eyed because he didn't yet know how to fall apart. She had stayed when everyone else calculated what they could take. She stayed still. Did you sleep? She asked each morning. Yes, he always said. She always knew he was lying. One morning, she set down the folded blanket in her arms and looked at him directly. You don't need more medicine, Anthony. You need peace. Peace doesn't exist for people like me. She was quiet for a moment. Then, sometimes it comes in a form you don't expect. He didn't think about those words again, until the day she came back from the village, with noise. Her name was Oma. He heard her before he saw her. He was in his study, reviewing a contract, when laughter came through the walls. Not the careful, measured kind his staff usually offered, but something completely unguarded, full-throated, The kind of laughter that belongs to people who have never been told to make themselves smaller. It broke through the silence of the mansion like light through a curtained room. He told himself it was irritating, but he stopped reading. When Mama Grace brought her to his office, Oma stood in the doorway wearing the expression of someone who had walked into far more frightening rooms than this and come out talking. She was perhaps 30, with bright eyes and the particular posture of a woman who had carried heavy things for a long time and learned to carry them with her chin up. "Sir," she said, without waiting to be addressed, "I can clean, cook, and organize anything in this house. I can wash your shoes until they reflect your future." Anthony looked at her. Then, and this startled him, he laughed. Small, barely a sound, but real. And it had been so long since something real came out of him that it sat in the air between them like something neither of them knew what to do with. "You're hired," he said. She was supposed to bring dinner and leave. She didn't leave. She set the tray down, looked at the chair across from him with the casual assessment of someone deciding whether it was worth sitting in, and sat. She began talking about the village, about the bus that had broken down twice on the way here, about a goat that had apparently caused a significant dispute between two families and shown no remorse. Her hands moved when she spoke. Her face changed with every sentence. Anthony said nothing, but somewhere between the second story and the third, his shoulders dropped. The tightness in his chest, that permanent resident he had stopped noticing the way you stop noticing a dull pain, loosened, just slightly. His mind, which never stopped moving, simply followed her voice instead of itself. Then, her voice stopped. He looked up.
She was asleep, curled slightly in the chair, head tipped back, breathing slowly and without struggle. Sleep had come to her the way it used to come to him long ago, like something that simply belonged, like a thing that required no effort and no permission. Anthony stood and looked at her for a long moment. Something ached in him that he hadn't expected. Not pain exactly, but the specific grief of watching someone hold something you had lost, something you couldn't even name the moment you lost it. He picked up the blanket from the sofa arm and laid it over her, carefully, the way you handle something you don't want to disturb. Then he lay down, stared at the ceiling, waited for 12:30 to take him. It didn't come. His body softened, his mind went quiet, not empty, but still, the way a room goes still when it is finally warm. And slowly, without deciding to, Anthony Olamide fell asleep. He woke to morning light. He lay completely still. He had slept. He turned his head. The chair was empty, but he remembered her voice, her presence, the blanket he had laid over her before he lay down and gave himself, carefully, to something he hadn't trusted in 5 years. He didn't tell anyone, but from that night, he asked for her. Every evening, every meal, a quiet pattern formed without announcement. She talked, he listened, and the nights that had been his enemies slowly became something he could survive, then something he could rest inside. He started noticing things she didn't say. The way she laughed louder when she looked worried, the way she sent money home at the end of each month and ate less the following week without mentioning it. The way she kept a photograph in her apron pocket, worn soft at the edges from handling, that she touched sometimes when she thought no one was watching. He found her one night in the kitchen, long after the house had gone still. She was sitting at the small table by the window, alone in the half-dark, holding the photograph in both hands. Her mother. He could see it from the doorway. A woman with Oma's same eyes, her same way of holding herself, captured in a moment of ordinary life that now existed only in paper. Tears moved down Oma's face slowly, quietly, the kind a person cries not in collapse, but in exhaustion,
when they have been strong for so long that the strength simply runs out for a few minutes and the truth comes through. Anthony stood in the doorway and didn't move. He understood, watching her, that she had been doing this the whole time, laughing through the days and weeping through the nights, sending every spare coin home while feeding herself less, keeping her mother alive on what little she earned in someone else's enormous house, and never once letting it show, never once making her pain someone else's burden. She had been giving him peace while quietly drowning in her own worry. He went back upstairs without a word. He sat at his desk in the dark for a long time. Then he made a phone call. The next morning, Oma received a call from her village. Her mother's medical bills, all of them, had been paid, anonymously. Food had been arranged, delivered to the door. The clinic had been fully stocked with her mother's medications for the next 6 months. Whoever had done it had left no name and asked for no thanks. Oma sat down on the kitchen step and wept. Not from sadness, from the particular overwhelm of receiving kindness so complete and so unexpected that your body doesn't know what to do with it. When someone sees you, truly sees the thing you have been hiding, and responds not with pity, but with quiet, generous action. She didn't know it was him. He never told her. That was the point. Then one evening, she was gone. Her mother had taken a sudden turn. She left quickly, a bag in her hand, a brief word to Mama Grace, and the mansion went quiet in a different way. The way it goes quiet when the thing that was filling it has left, and you realize only then how much space it had been taking up.
That night, 12:30 came back. It came back harder than it had in years. Chest tight, room slightly tilting, silence flooding every corner. Anthony sat on the floor beside his bed and breathed through it, but his hands were trembling, and he understood now that what he was feeling wasn't only insomnia. It was the specific terror of knowing exactly what you are missing. He called her. No answer. Again. Again. He set the phone on the floor beside him and sat in the dark, and felt something he had not allowed himself to feel since a hospital corridor 5 years ago. The helplessness of needing someone you cannot reach. He was still sitting there when she called back. "Sir?" He exhaled. One long, slow breath. Then, "Come back." A pause. "I can't sleep," he whispered. His voice was stripped of everything. No authority, no control, nothing remaining but the plain truth of it. In a small room in the village, sitting beside her mother's bed, Oma closed her eyes. She had heard powerful men speak before. She had heard commands and decisions and the certainty of people who had never had to ask for anything. She had never heard one sound like this. Quiet, unguarded, asking. "I'm coming," she said. When she returned, she didn't talk. She sat beside him, close, quiet, not filling the silence but inhabiting it with him, which is a different thing entirely and far more rare. "Sleep," she said softly. And he did. He told her everything weeks later, his parents, the voicemail, 12:30, the 5 years of fighting everything except the thing that mattered most. He spoke slowly, without performance, and she listened without rushing to comfort him, because she understood that some things don't need comfort, they just need to be heard. "I love you," he said, when there was nothing left to say. Oma looked at him for a long moment, not with surprise, not with joy, with something more serious than either. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "Or are you just afraid of being alone again?" The question reached somewhere deep. He sat with it, actually sat with it, which is harder than it sounds for a man who had built his entire life on certainty. "I was alone before you came," he said finally. "I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of losing you." She believed him, not because of his wealth or his certainty or anything he could give her, but because of what he had just done, held an honest question honestly, without flinching. The world didn't receive it quietly. There were people who laughed, who questioned, who called it impossible. Anthony had spent 5 years fighting harder battles.
"She is my choice," he said simply. "I won't apologize for it." On their wedding night, in the same room where everything had begun, Oma lay beside him in the quiet. "Sad," she whispered. "Yes? If I talk too much, you will not return me, yes?" He pulled her close. "You're the reason I sleep," he said. She laughed softly against his shoulder. "And you're the reason I stayed." That night, there was no 12:30, no tightening, no silence that felt like something missing, just peace. Real, earned, shared peace between two people who had each been carrying something heavy alone and had finally, quietly, set it down together. Because the greatest healing rarely arrives the way we expect it. It doesn't come with credentials. It doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it arrives as a loud, warm, stubborn presence that simply refuses to leave, and in staying gives you back the one thing all the money in the world could not buy: rest, presence, the knowledge that someone sees you. If this story moved something in you, you already understand what it was trying to say. And if you haven't yet subscribed to Hidden Kindness Tales, this is your moment. There are more stories waiting here, and every one of them is true in the ways that matter most. Grief that goes unprocessed doesn't disappear. It lives in the body, quietly, and surfaces in the dark. This story shows that healing rarely comes through achievement or willpower alone, but through genuine human presence. Oma's kindness, freely given without agenda, reaches places that medicine and money cannot. And Anthony's anonymous generosity reveals a truth older viewers often understand deeply, that the most meaningful kindness asks for nothing in return. Together, this story teaches that love is not rescue, it is presence. And presence, offered honestly, is the most powerful thing one human being can give another.